Very good to all. My name is Jose Angel Zabalegui and I operated under the pseudonym of Cyclical Analysis within the social trading platform A Bull. On this platform I am a popular investor at the elite level, and before continuing with this presentation about the projections that we set for ourselves for the next quarter at a macro level, one would like to remind you of a series of legal warnings.
Trimestre a nivel macro, me gustaría recordarte una serie de advertencias legales.
To continue, we must bear in mind that all the content that I am going to show you only has an educational purpose, that the investment and any financial operation is under your own decision and risk, and that in no case anything that you can listen to in this presentation you have to take the rest into account as if it were a recommendation to buy or sell any financial asset.
Puedas escuchar en esta presentación lo debas de tener en cuenta como si fuera una recomendación de compra o venta de cualquier activo financiero.
The swing you need advice, please go to a company, to a person who is duly accredited to be able to do it.
Una empresa, a una persona que esté debidamente acreditada para poder realizarlo.
Always remember that any chart that shows you past results is not a guarantee of future results, and that any trade you make has to be fully reported and ensured.
Cualquier operación que realizas tiene que ser plenamente informada y asegúrate de ello.
To continue, I wanted to make a kind of summary of what the investment business is, given that my professional projection began working in a bank and I was able to observe the different layers that exist within this business.
Mi proyección profesional comenzó trabajando en un banco y pude observar cuáles eran las distintas capas que existen dentro de este negocio.
In a very simplified way, but which I think is easily understandable, the first layer, the outermost layer of this business, is all retail-oriented, that is, end-customer-oriented. It is usually a fairly stable layer with a very long-term vision where few things change over time. We can clearly identify access to equities, stock markets, and access to different funds of any nature, and of any related underlying assets that they invest both in equities, fixed income, mixed in.
Activo subyacente relacionado que invierten tanto en renta variable, renta fija, mixtos
in real estate, raw materials, etc., different strategies of all kinds, etc., and then we could incorporate a close layer that would be everything related to private investment and investment.
Podríamos incorporar una capa cercana que sería todo lo relacionado con la inversión privada y la inversión
corporate to the company, where a more ad hoc structure is created, or a business to business rather than a business to consumer.
Más ad hoc a un negocio a negocio, más que de un negocio a consumidor.
In the next layer, and we have already entered what is the central nucleus of what the investment business is, we will find the management of the balance of the bank of its own identity,
del balance del propio banco, de la propia entidad,
in which we find ourselves with some strategic decisions of the positioning of the bank itself in the face of the macro situation that normally comes upon us, and the most important part is the positioning that it has in the bank in relation to the interest rate curve, AAA, all terms, what risk or what risk exposure do the financial markets have, and all that activity.
La curva de tipos de interés a todos los plazos, qué riesgo, qué exposición de riesgo tienen los mercados financieros.
What position the bank will take strategically in the face of macro trends and the current and expected economic situation in the medium term. It is a much more dynamic layer, and they are usually advised by people other than a council of people who make decisions based on the information. That we are meeting week by week, but in the center, in the nuclear part of what this business is what is called trading in Excel Q Trump, the trading room of a bank. That is where I started my professional career, and it is there where I realized the different scales that there were at the business level with the financial markets. It must be said that when
y es ahí donde me di cuenta las distintas escalas que había a nivel de negocio con los mercados financieros. Hay que decir que
I used to work in this trading room, and part of the public debt team were market makers.
de deuda pública, éramos creadores de mercado.
This meant that we went to the primary market to provide liquidity to the public treasury, in this case Spanish, and we also provide liquidity in the secondary market, listing on a recurring basis on the different broken age platforms, ideals that exist in the secondary market. At the same time, we quoted and gave liquidity to large clients, large funds, large managers who called us to ask us for a quote on different bonds and positions.
Para pedirnos cotización sobre distintos bonos y posiciones.
What does all this mean? Because in the end this is a healthy market, it is a big box in which a large number of positions, both desired and undesired, enter and exit in the sense that if you had an upward bias in fixed income, well, if you entered some client positions that bought from our balance these positions we were short in the market and we had to go out in the market to cover those positions.
Esas posiciones, nosotros nos encontrábamos cortos en el mercado y teníamos que salir al mercado a cubrir esas posiciones.
Therefore, they were not desired positions if you did not find them. And in this sense, the main activity that we had to do was to manage these positions, to trade with these positions. That is the true spirit that underlies is in this core. What is trading? And it is a shorter-term investment. Many times I meet people who try to put in places opposite to what investment is. And what is trading? I would say no. Just like in athletics, we can talk about marathons and we can talk about 50-meter sprints. In both cases, we are talking about athletics. However, to run a marathon you need different preparation and training, you even need a different outfit than to run in the 50-meter sprint, you need a much more specific preparation, much more. Let's say powerful, with more strength in the short term to move, not then trading and long-term investment or investment modalities. The only difference they have is certain strategies that can be developed in one and in another, and the temporary vision of the retention of that investment when we talk about trading. In my case we talk about retentions that go from a few days to a few weeks. What cyclical analysis aims to extract this spirit from the market room, bring it out, put it at the service of copying investors who are on the eToro platform, make it accessible to anyone and develop their own trading strategy as if we were in the nuclear park from a bank. And what is our strategy? Well, in the end we continue and honoring our name cyclical analysis. We do a technical analysis based on the cycles in the cyclical theory of JHM Arts. This theory, to define it very simply, what it tries to do is identify the different movements, oscillations of market sentiment that occur around an underlying trend or a long-term trend. To understand us, that underlying trend would be the people who work that marathon, those investment funds that operate in the long term, while trading what you try to take advantage of is that feeling or fluctuations that occur daily in any financial market. Our strategy is very simple and we try benefit from these oscillations, trying to sell when it is high and trying to buy when it is low. So if we talk about timing, yes, it is necessary to have an exact timing of what we can expect, and it is the most important part that analyzes the cyclical analysis low theory by JM #.
Un timing exacto de lo que podemos esperar y es la parte más importante que analiza el análisis cíclico bajo la teoría de JM Hurst.
What can you expect with a strategy? Yes, good if you listen eloquently, that you can double your money and that you can get rich in it in the short term and trading nothing further. This is Trading is like any other business, you have a risk benefit, the greater the risk, the greater the benefit for also the potential loss. We follow a level 3 risk within the bull risk rating is a scale that ranges between 1 and 10, therefore we would be if we follow a moderate risk strategy, and based on that risk we have to know what we can expect in annual returns. Here I have drawn a table that I do not want to go into very deeply, but if we are around a risk 3 we can expect annual returns.
Aquí he sacado una tabla que no quiero entrar muy a fondo, pero si estamos en torno a un riesgo 3 podemos esperar rendimientos anuales
between 15, 16, 17%. We can see it in this curve. This is the positioning of cyclical analysis with respect to the risk-reward return benefit, in which we settle on doing a directional investment strategy, a directional swing trading, or a strategy absolute return that tries to take advantage of both the ups and downs of a market.
O una estrategia de retorno absoluto que intenta aprovechar tanto las alzas como las bajadas de un mercado.
What we do is be exhaustive and systemic in the sense of always applying stop-loss levels, having risk control, having exposure control at all times, and quickly adapting to market circumstances, which means that if you work with stop-loss and there is an exacerbated volatility within the markets, these stops will jump, we will have a series of losses, but limited, but we will pass.
Una volatilidad exacerbada dentro de los mercados, saltarán esos stop-loss. Tendremos una serie de pérdidas, pero limitadas, pero pasaremos.
Our liquidity before thinking again to reanalyze what is happening in the market. From here we have developed an algorithm that makes the mathematical approach. We intend to transfer the mathematical approach that JHM # made in his book The Profit Magic of Stocks Transaction Time.
Hizo en su libro The Profit Magic of Stocks Transaction Timing.
That book that talks about timing, and what we do is try to project into the future what are the oscillations at different levels of degree, or rather, at different levels of time horizon.
O mejor dicho, a distintos niveles de horizonte temporal.
What are we going to see in the graphs that I will present to you in each quarter about the projection of the different most important markets that I follow? Well, we are always going to have what is the representation of the price in daily bars, and what we are going to see is how that price develops around its equilibrium lines.
En barras diarias, y lo que vamos a ver es cómo se desarrolla ese precio en torno a sus líneas de equilibrio.
In this graph, we are always going to see two equilibrium lines. One is called the orange long-term equilibrium line, and the medium-term equilibrium line, even more so in the short term, is going to be the blue one, and what we are going to do is analyze the oscillations that occur around these lines. Okay, below we are going to have two levels of indicators with our algorithm.
En torno a estas líneas, ¿vale? Abajo vamos a tener dos niveles de indicadores con nuestro algoritmo
cyclic analysis, in which we are going to try to project where that price will be located with respect to that equilibrium line. At the bottom we can see the first indicator that is in the medium term and the second indicator that is in the long term, and we are going to analyze which is the situation of the price around this equilibrium line. In this sense we will always take the central line. In this case it is telling us that
en torno a esta línea de equilibrio. En este sentido siempre vamos a tomar la línea central. En este caso nos está diciendo que
the price is below the equilibrium line, and that potentially in a few days it is feasible that it could cross the equilibrium line upwards. That is, we would look for a projection of its life and that it crosses its real equilibrium line. We would be thinking the same thing with the lines.
Y que cruzase su línea de equilibrio real. Lo mismo estaríamos pensando con las líneas.
Long-term, the long-term equilibrium line, if we have a projection of price developing above the line, we would expect that this price should develop towards or above this orange line, thus giving a fairly solid or fairly complete view of what we can expect for the next ones.
Dando así una visión bastante sólida o bastante completa de lo que podemos esperar para las próximas.
For the next few weeks. So let's begin the review of the different markets. We are going to try to make a macro vision at all levels, reviewing what is variable income, fixed income, raw materials, etc., etc., some important currency pair, and thus we can have a slightly macro vision of the situation, and for what remains of the good year we start with equities with the SP.
Poco macro de la situación y para lo que resta del año. Bueno, comenzamos con renta variable, con el S&P
500, the index for the American index, the reference index in the United States, and although we are subject to certain expressions, the environment is quite volatile, and with a lot of downward pressure we are right now at a key point, at a point of potential support, and we are going to see from the projection.
Está siendo bastante volátil y con muchas presiones a la baja. Estamos ahora mismo en un punto clave, en un punto de potencial soporte, y vamos a ver desde la proyección si
If this can happen, it can happen, and we can trust that it can rebound or not in the long term. The most interesting thing we are seeing is that it is not indicating large additional depreciations to those already existing, and that the price should tend to be or develop by above its long-term balance line, that is, above the balance of the orange line.
Y que el precio debería tender a estar o a desarrollarse por encima de su línea de equilibrio a largo plazo, es decir, por encima del equilibrio de la línea naranja.
Being so, we could expect that the underlying trend should be supported and that it could give good support to what this market is and in the short term, which is what it indicates to us, since the same thing that we have seen a new downward phase that has been marked since this high point to practically this point here, that we could be looking at its support zone, and that from here.
Que ha sido marcado desde este punto álgido hasta prácticamente este punto de aquí, que podríamos estar viendo su zona de soporte y que a partir de aquí
what we could see is an attempted upward crossover of
del precio.
Price, that is to say, we should be able to attend a rebound that could have a certain depth, and that could send the SP 500 to test this blue line again. We are going to continue with the VIX, and you are going to realize that the projection that I am going to give here can be supported by the projection that we have in him VIX in the volatility index of this market.
Vais a dar cuenta de que la proyección que voy a dar aquí puede estar soportada por la proyección que tenemos en el VIX, el índice de volatilidad de este mercado.
And I am going to dare to begin to draw what I think the next few months may become, and it is a great consolidation, a great range that may be occurring in the market. This indicates that there may not be great oscillations, great movements, and that the value will have to consolidate by these levels.
Esto nos viene a indicar que posiblemente no existirán grandes oscilaciones, grandes movimientos, y que el valor tenderá a consolidarse por estos niveles.
Continuing with that idea of the VIX, we could be seeing a high, a peak, a bottom, a forgiveness, a ceiling within what the VIX is, both at a long-term level, which would be indicating a deep underlying relaxation of this volatility, and therefore it is associated to rises in the market with a spike too.
Una relajación subyacente de esta volatilidad, y por tanto está asociada a alzas en el mercado, con un pico también
in the short term that begins to indicate that certain relaxation that would be to come, and that could lead the North American indices to rise as soon as he observed this section here for the next few weeks, and we see this level of oscillation, which comes to indicate is also that potential volatility formation or consolidation of volatility.
Vemos este nivel de oscilación, lo que me viene a indicar es también esa potencial formación o consolidación de la volatilidad.
In a horizontal environment with ups and downs, making this potential scenario more plausible, we are going to continue with crude, with West Texas, the crude that is listed in the United States, and although we are also observing that a very powerful underlying trend has come that began around this area here.
Que cotiza en Estados Unidos, y si bien también estamos observando que viene de una tendencia subyacente muy potente que empezó por esta zona de aquí.
Here when he crossed the line of balance, and all this time he has developed above his line of balance. Yes, we have noticed a certain relaxation that we expected in this section, and it has come to bear in its underlying balance line.
subyacente.
What we could expect in the short term, not much, because although in the underlying trend it cannot mark up the short-term indicator continues to give us some modest downward pressures for which it invites me to think about a certain development. Let's say, bearish side influenced by the short term but also supported by this underlying subtrend. I think it could be a plausible scenario to think that we develop in a side range, and without great interest in it we went to natural gas here. We did see a lot of volatility, and let's say at the
sin gran interés en el mismo. Pasamos al gas natural. Aquí sí que vimos mucha volatilidad y digamos a nivel.
At the long-term underlying level, we saw how this market has been developing practically for a very long time, in months, even years, above its orange equilibrium line, as shown in the indicator below, although we are now witnessing a certain relaxation, especially led by because of the underlying trend.
En el indicador de abajo, si bien estamos ahora asistiendo a una cierta relajación, sobre todo liderada por la tendencia subyacente,
and commanded by what is the medium-term oscillation, which is the daily that we could expect in the short term, well, a rebound.
podríamos esperar a corto plazo? Pues un rebote.
A rebound that can take us to the market to correct. We could go to look for the balance line and then start a new bearish market that could be supported, because below the long-term credit line, and then return to our upward path.
Un nuevo mercado bajista que podría verse soportado pues por debajo de la línea de equilibrio a largo plazo, para después volver a una senda alcista.
We continue with the euro-dollar. We have a similar situation of mixed trends, with an underlying trend that has been bearish for a long time. For many months the downward trend started there.
Ha sido bajista desde hace mucho tiempo, desde hace muchos meses. La tendencia bajista empezó ahí.
It has always been developing below the blue balance line, and it gives us a medium-term projection that in a few weeks it could try to cross that. But the bad news is in its medium-term projection, and that apparently shows more dominant today, we could continue to have a ladder effect.
La mala noticia se encuentra en su proyección a medio plazo, que aparentemente se muestra más dominante actualmente. Podríamos seguir teniendo un efecto escalera.
It is predominant in this market for a while, plus a ladder effect, always downwards to look for a bottom or bullish divergence at some point that can give us a key to a change in trend.
Buscar en algún punto un suelo o divergencia alcista que nos pudiera dar una clave de cambio de tendencia.
But right now, and despite the fact that the underlying long-term trend is on the upside, we should expect the medium-term cycle.
Debemos esperar que el ciclo a medio plazo.
The medium-term cycles are more dominant. We go to the Dolar Index. We find ourselves in a similar very bullish situation from this moment. Since it crossed the orange line, it has developed above its equilibrium and orange line, as we can see here.
Por encima de su línea de equilibrio naranja, como lo podemos ver aquí.
He always above the orange line. This is the projection line, okay, and now we could expect a certain relaxation of this underlying trend, although we find ourselves with the same situation again, and that is that the medium-term cycle is proving to be more dominant, very bullish now. If it is to be expected that in the next few days we may have some correction relaxation, but then we could go back to our old ways, and well, always the underlying trend of the dollar seems
siempre la tendencia subyacente del dólar
looks strong. First dominated by cycles in the medium term, and then in a further underlying depression in the medium term.
Presión subyacente adicional en el medio plazo.
We continue with the bonds with the Central American rate, the price of 30-year bonds. The situation is also similar. We have a negative underlying trend that started in this area here. It found some resistance and we continue its downward path, although it is possible that we can find some short-term rebound that could
y seguimos su senda bajista. Si bien es posible que podemos encontrar un cierto rebote a corto plazo que pudiera
support or have to find its resistance in the blue line, we will see bearish pressures again until when good, because like all the analyses we do, we analyze new pieces of information every week that are those candles that develop each day, and that makes us adapt our analysis in our strategy week by week.
Que son esas velas que se desarrollan cada día y que nos hace adecuar nuestro análisis y nuestra estrategia semana a semana.
Stick with gold. Gold has an underlying trend to a bear that started here when the projection crossed its yellow line.
Que comenzó aquí cuando cruzó la proyección su línea amarilla.
While we can have 111, let's say, an appreciation of gold in the short term, everything seems to indicate that we could attack that blue line, even exceed it, taking into account the power of the projection and also taking into account the underlying trend.
A lo que es la potencia de la proyección y atendiendo también a que la tendencia subyacente
well, it is also positive that we can expect that at some point it will stop and we will have a new downward leg.
Y volvamos a tener una nueva pata bajista.
Finally, and we are going to see what Bitcoin is in this case, we do not do a double analysis, because we do not have enough data to do a long-term analysis. We need many years of data to do this. In this case we have daily data and we are only going to do its analysis in the medium term. As always, the relationship of the price with respect to its blue line. In this case we are having an underlying trend that is clearly being bearish, and with it its medium-term trends that find resistance in its blue line, as we believe is happening right now, that although it may have some rise in the short-term few days, we believe that it will end up developing a new
línea azul, como creemos está pasando ahora mismo, que si bien puede tener a corto plazo algún alza de unos pocos días, creemos que terminará por desarrollar una nueva
bearish leg A that can make Bitcoin find new lows again. With this general squad, perhaps the most important thing to highlight is a relaxation of volatility in the medium term in these coming weeks. See a recovery in equities, see a gold recovery, see momentary recovery.
De la volatilidad a medio plazo en estas próximas semanas, ver una recuperación de la renta variable, ver una recuperación del oro, ver una recuperación momentánea.
Momentary correction of the dollar, and with some raw materials at an energy level, well, relatively stable. So thank you very much to all of us. We continue working on this line, and good luck with all regards.
Relativamente estables. Así que muchas gracias a todos. Seguimos trabajando en esta línea y mucha suerte con todo. Un saludo.